Hey, how's it going? Hope you're having a good day. What are you doing? Want to talk about Julio Jones? In light of the receiver requesting a trade out of Atlanta, he was connected to every team, including the Patriots, Seahawks, Rams, Ravens, Bills, Lakers, Padres, and Maple Leafs. Even at the age of 32, everyone wanted Julio, who eventually found his way to the Titans. And there's a good reason for that. It's because Julio sucks. Actually, it's because he's been the best receiver of the last decade, a statement you'll find many in the NFL circle agreeing with. With great breakaway speed, contested catch ability, ball security, and frame, we know exactly what makes Julio so good. Now, I could talk about how Julio fits the Titans' offense, how he helps A.J. Brown, how he helps Ryan Tannehill, or how he brushes his teeth. Does he put his toothpaste on the brush before or after washing it? But I don't want to. I want to focus on how he was a watershed receiver that not only set numerous records in yardage, but meant the entire world to Atlanta sports fans. So strap in and enjoy. This is the art of Julio Jones. Forming a dynamic receiving trio with Roddy White and Tony Gonzalez, Julio made an immediate impact in his rookie season, setting a franchise record in receiving yards as a rookie with 954. In the following season, Julio earned his first of many trips to the Pro Bowl and a career-high 10 touchdowns. Unfortunately, Julio's 2013 season would end prematurely due to a foot injury that kept him out of 11 of 16 games on the year. Despite this, he still produced at over 115 yards per game, on pace to reach 1,800. Then, in 2014, Julio finally entered the top tier of wideouts and never turned back. Putting together the finest season from a Falcons receiver to that date, Julio's 1,593 yards on 104 catches and 6 touchdowns allowed him to begin one of the greatest primes we will ever see from a wideout. See, 2014 was the first of 6 consecutive seasons where Julio posted at least 1,300 receiving yards. The only other receiver in NFL history to do this is Hall of Fame snub Torrey Holt. That's pretty significant company considering, well, only 2 receivers in NFL history have done this. And Julio absolutely refused to stop accelerating in 2015, putting up the second most receiving yards in a single season with 1,871. His 139 catches tied Antonio Brown for not just the lead league, but the second most in NFL history at the time. Speaking of history, earning 100 receiving yards per game in a single season is sort of a big deal, as it's only happened 49 times in NFL history. Julio is one of 4 receivers to hit this mark at least 3 times. Lance Alworth, Antonio Brown, and Calvin Johnson all hit 100 yards per game 3 times each. Julio has done it 5 times. Nothing about Julio is normal, and that's exactly what he set out to be, as he's destroyed records not just in the NFL, but for the Falcons as a whole. Real quickly, I want to take a look at these single-season leaders for receiving yards in Atlanta's history. As aforementioned, we have Julio's 2015 season in first place with 1,871. Now let's go to second place, where we have Julio Jones in 2018 with 1,677. He's also in third place with 1,593 in 2014, and fourth with 1,444 in 2017. Finally, in fifth place, we have Julio Jones in 2016 with 1,409 receiving yards. He's also in sixth place with 1,394 in 2019. Julio Jones has the 6th highest seasons of receiving yardage in Falcons history. That's how much he's meant to the franchise. That's how much he means, even if he no longer plays in Atlanta. Continuing the theme of receiving yards, trust me, it's not going to stop anytime soon. No player has more receiving yards in their first 100 games than Julio. Not Calvin Johnson, not Randy Moss, not Jerry Rice, Julio. There's a theme with Julio breaking records that involve the number 100. As previously mentioned, he has the most seasons averaging 100 yards a game out of any receiver. Previously unmentioned, out of any pass catcher drafted in the 21st century, no one has more 100-yard games. Julio's 61 games of 100-plus yards, including a postseason, are third all-time. I'm not sure if he can ever catch Jerry Rice's 84, but he's nearing Randy Moss, who had 67 of those games. 6 more to tie, 7 more to beat it. But Julio has one thing not even those two greats ever had: a 300-yard game. In fact, he's one of 5 players in NFL history to put up 300 receiving yards in a single game, doing so in 2016 against the Panthers. Incredibly enough, he put up exactly 300 thanks to this late touchdown to practically ice a win for Atlanta. I'm pretty sure this is the only time in NFL history a receiver put up exactly 300 receiving yards. That's kind of a big deal. Lowering the standards a tad, there's been 29 instances where a receiver put up at least 250 yards in a single game. 26 combined receivers have done this once. Julio has done it a total of 3 times. All 3 of those games set records for receiving yards against certain opponents. Looking at this chart, we can see the most receiving yards each team in alphabetical order has allowed to a certain player. Only 2 receivers as of this recording hold this distinction against multiple teams: Wes Chandler and Julio Jones. Julio's 300-yard game against the Panthers is, of course, easily the most the team is allowed to a single player, as no one else has more than 208. What's also beautiful is Julio has more receiving yards in a single game against the Packers than anyone else, with his 259 yards receiving at Green Bay in 2014. Jesus. Now, Julio did break the single game mark against the Buccaneers, which has since been broken by Tyreek Hill in 2020. So, as it stands, he's put up the most receiving yards against an opponent twice. I could go on about how many records Julio has set, and I think I will. Bringing back our old friend Calvin Johnson, he broke an NFL record by hitting 10,000 receiving yards in his first 115 games, the fastest rate in NFL history. And then Julio hit that mark in 104 games. Yeah. Naturally, he did this with some lofty single-season numbers, including being one of 5 receivers with multiple seasons of 1,600-plus receiving yards. In the postseason, Julio is one of 3 players with at least 2 games of 180-plus yards. A stat I cherry-picked to make this video look better, sure, but it happened. Hey. But above all of these records, one stands alone as Julio's most prized, iconic record. .95 yards per game, the most from a receiver in NFL history. More than Jerry Rice, more than Randy Moss, more than Marvin Harrison, Terrell Owens, Calvin Johnson, or Antonio Brown. He's the only receiver that's played a minimum of 48 games with at least a 90-yard average per game. Finally, let's take a look at where Julio stands in all-time receiving yards. In parentheses to the side, you'll see the number of games each receiver has played. Larry Fitzgerald is the closest to breaking Jerry Rice's record, and he's not only 5,000 yards away, but also 5,000 years old, so we have no idea when he will hang it up. In terms of which active player is closest after that, it's Julio Jones, 20th in all-time receiving yards. Now, every other receiver on this list has played at least 173 regular season games. Julio has played 135. It's likely unlikely, but at the rate Julio is at, and if he plays the same number of games as Jerry Rice did, 303 to be exact, he'd set Rice's receiving record on fire, put it out, and bury it in his backyard. Julio Jones defines a generation of players, shattering and being part of records I didn't even know existed. Okay, I lied a bit there, I knew some of them existed, but the point is, even if Julio never plays 300 games or matches Jerry Rice's record of receiving yards, or if he doesn't score the most touchdowns every season, or if he doesn't have a Super Bowl ring, or the Atlanta Falcons wasted his career by not getting him a Super Bowl ring and blowing a 28-3 lead in that Super Bowl, what else does he have to prove? Nothing. He's a Hall of Fame player if he retired right now, though I'm sure Titans fans are begging for me to stop talking about that. Fair enough, but Julio meant so much to the city of Atlanta and its fans, even in the aftermath of 28-3. fans could look forward to knowing that they had the best receiver of the 2010s on their roster, putting up mammoth records. That's who Tennessee is getting, and that's who Atlanta had. It sucks, Atlanta. I know it does. But life is invaluable. You only get one life, and you only get one Julio Jones. In this sense, you can come away from this knowing that you lived in the same lifetime as Julio Jones. Now let's talk about why Julio Jones is the most overrated player.